So just about 1 week ago, Netflix released their very own adaptation of Go Nagai's famous series, Devilman, a manga that has inspired some of the most prolific manga and anime to date. Without Devilman, such beloved series like these just wouldn't be the same, or exist at all for that matter. Well, in comes Devilman Crybaby, Netflix's very own modern take on the series, directed by Masaki Yusa, a pretty prolific director who has been behind some of the most interesting and visually unique anime out there. All in all, Devilman Crybaby had a lot going for it, but considering the manga was only originally published in the early 70s, was the approach taken to adapt it a good one? Hello everyone, this is the RPG Monger, and after thinking about it intently for a week, Devilman Crybaby really was better than I anticipated, considering Netflix's previous anime-related ventures. However, that does not mean it is without its flaws. Everything has a target audience, from Saturday morning cartoons to loud obnoxious pieces of garbage. Knowing your target audience can be absolutely necessary for your project's success, whatever it may be, and the same goes to those who make anime. When putting something like Devilman Crybaby on Netflix, you're not just putting it out to people already familiar with anime and manga, you're putting it out to an audience that spans all sorts of people throughout the entire world. Plus, considering the original manga is from the early 70s, adapting a manga that old in 2018 is no small feat, as when adapting something of this age, you can go one of two ways. You can either go the JoJo route and just adapt everything exactly like it was in the manga, or you can go the Devilman Crybaby route, where the story is still pretty well adapted, but with changes to the situations within the story and the characters themselves. Though considering there's probably still a good bunch of you who haven't bothered with Devilman Crybaby yet, let me give you all some of my spoiler-free thoughts on whether you should watch it or not. Point blank, I wholeheartedly recommend that you watch Devilman Crybaby. Even with my bias from reading the original manga, it handles specific things quite well compared to all of the many previous animated iterations. And hell, it actually gets to the end of the story, because believe it or not, in the many decades since the manga came out, no anime or OVA has ever adapted the entire story faithfully, with the closest things out there never really actually being able to adapt the real ending. Not to mention, the animation typical of works done by Masaki Yusa is incredible, and one of the best assets of Devilman Crybaby. I mean, in between you and me, there were some scenes I frankly enjoyed more in Crybaby solely due to these things. Though considering I've seen droves of people now go into Devilman Crybaby completely blind, I will warn that if you're sensitive to such spicy things as nudity, gore, and everything in between, you may not enjoy Devilman Crybaby as much as others. But anyways, with that out of the way, let's go on to the spoiler section of the video. For now, let's focus on how the first 5 episodes of Devilman Crybaby were handled, because I will say, there were many interesting choices the director made for these episodes. So in case you didn't know, the Devilman manga isn't exactly like your typical Shonen Jump series with oodles of chapters ready to be adapted. In Devilman's case, the length of the entire series is 6 chapters. A pretty short story to become so famous, right? And at the very base concept, Devilman is pretty easy to adapt on the surface level, since all you have is a wimp who turns into Devilman! And ends up becoming a nearly completely different person because of it, at least physically. It's where the characters and themes come into play that really requires a solid adaptation. It really is no easy feat, but it also opens the door to new possibilities. Like for example, you could maybe take those pre-existing characters and expand on them, flesh them out more for a way more in-depth experience. And I will say, Devilman Crybaby did try to do that, as with the inclusion of the whole new track plotline surrounding Akira, Miki, and the gang, they really were going in that direction. Did they succeed, however? Well, in varying degrees. At some points, I'd say yeah, it did help develop the characters, with Miki really getting a lot more well-deserved attention. As a trade-off though, and this may just be because of my bias from having read the manga long before Crybaby had even come out, but especially in these first 5 episodes, in my opinion, I felt some situations were a bit too drawn drawn out, with others being glossed over slightly faster than I'd hoped. One thing that was particularly a surprise to me is how Miko was handled. She was taken in a completely different direction than her manga counterpart. I mean completely. Usually when adaptations do this, it's to a pretty lackluster result. But in Crybaby's case, I really wasn't all that disappointed. While it did have some rough patches, I feel the drastic changes made to her character really did end up fitting in with this very modern take on the series. And speaking of that, let's touch on the modernization Devilman went through to reach Crybaby, because while I personally have nothing against the differences in character designs, comparing them side by side is pretty funny, admittedly. I mean, just look at Xenon, a character that in the manga was this massive menacing figure with 4 faces that spoke on their own, and I mean in Crybaby, well, I mean he has shoulder pads now. But I digress. Ryo's hairstyle is something I kind of came to low-key love as time went on. Oh yeah, and Akira has a butt chin. That's just kind of a thing that's there now. To get back on track, now let's look at the last 5 episodes where I personally believe the adaptation truly shines brighter than ever before. Especially with that scene, though I'll get into that in a bit. To be completely honest with you guys, I don't have many issues with how this segment of the story was handled. If anything, I have to praise it, because it's one thing to make a lackluster or alright adaptation, but when you actually take the source material and make additions that strengthen it as a whole, I have to give a standing ovation. Because while the Xenon fight was a bit off, I guess you could say, with them kind of just shoving him in there, that was completely made up for with the way that they handled quite possibly one of the most dramatic scenes in the manga, Miki's death. As with Devilman in the original, one of the most predominant themes that led to it having an impact on so many people is just that of who really were the demons in the end, humanity or the devils. Since considering Ryo's influence, or should I say, Satan's influence, made humanity go insane that easily, it really does leave you to wonder, and Devilman Crybaby captured this quite wonderfully in my opinion, even for someone like me who had already read the source material. The way that scene was restructured in Crybaby really hit me hard. Though now we're nearing the end, the controversial end at that, and holy hell, do I need to talk about how they handled this. First of all, in the beginning of the show, I was frankly confused about why they were showing all of those scenes of Akira and Ryo as children. I didn't really pay it too much thought at the time, but when they then utilized those same scenes at the last episode, it all just fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. Not to mention, the addition of a more fleshed out fighting scene between Akira and Ryo was something that as a fan of the original blew me away. Though besides all of that, it's how they adapted the very final scene that I have to applaud. The scene where legitimately no other Devilman anime has gone was, in my opinion, recreated beautifully and faithfully for that matter, and as a finishing touch at the very end of the anime, after all the credits have come and gone, they added that last little extra scene for closure that didn't even exist in the original. Talk about a cherry on top. You know, I'm gonna say it, Devilman Crybaby is truly the definitive adaptation of the Devilman manga. Even though the story was restructured to fit the binging format found on Netflix, I must say it was very consistent. You'll have anime like Parasite, for instance, that while end up having to modernize greatly, don't really ever use it to their advantage. In the case of Devilman Crybaby, like I said, amidst the shortcomings that came with it, really ended up utilizing the modernization more than I've ever seen. As someone who was greatly worried about how this heavily anticipated adaptation would play out, I am frankly quite satisfied. Though before I go on to my outro, I felt I should mention one last thing, and I honestly can't believe people are doing this. People, come on. Don't shame someone for liking a show that has explicit scenes in it. I mean, seriously, what kind of logic even is that? If you don't like something, then that's all fine and dandy. Going out of your way to call people perverted and disgusting is frankly idiotic. Sorry to end it all off on that note, but I just couldn't resist saying it. Someone had to. Overall, Devilman Crybaby sits high on the throne of anime that overcame the issues with adapting old manga. And if for some reason you haven't watched it by now, please get on it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, do subscribe. And today's cool thing of the day is another anime that will be going on Netflix, Violet Evergarden. Now, I'm probably gonna be bringing this up again in a future video because just the first episode alone blew me away. If I were to describe how I felt watching this anime, it's almost like watching a full-fledged movie. The animation quality alone puts a ton of other seasonal anime to utter shame. Coupled with a compelling story, I'm very excited to see where this show takes its characters, and to be honest, you should be too. So that being said, I'm the RPG Monger, and don't forget that each and every one of you are fantastic.